Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am joined by my brother behind the camera, Gritty Broman. How are you, Brent?
I'm well, thanks.
Today's podcast is going to be about, I guess, health, fitness, wellness. Like it's going to be about developing a strong body, a body that can handle, that doesn't get injured, basically building yourself up to be a beast against injury.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what brought this topic up is I've been hitting the gym quite a bit since I'm back from my long hunts. And I've been doing various workouts and posting them to Instagram. I did one the other day that it was 4 rounds of pistols, which are one-legged squats. You squat on one leg straight out, and you stand up, right? All the way to the ground, all the way up. And it was 28 pistols, and it was 4 rounds. So 4 times nearly 30, so it's over 100 pistols that you do as part of this workout. And then it was power cleans. It was like 15 cleans at 115, 4 rounds. So, and you're doing it for time, but you're also doing it, but I do it always, but while trying to maintain the best form that I can. Now, people, when they see me do that many one-legged squats, or even a single one-legged squat, they kind of freak out.
Yeah.
And most of them feel like I'm going to blow my knee out or something. But that's like looking at a gymnast that does the iron cross on a set of Olympic rings. And you're like, that dude's going to blow his shoulder out. It's like, well, actually, he built the stability to do that exercise. And he's actually less likely to hurt himself than the guy that sits at a computer all day and has a crappy shoulder. And when he goes to hang his Christmas lights and he slips and he grabs onto the rain gutter, he rips his shoulder out of socket. I exercise so I don't get injured. I do strength training so I don't get hurt. And it's not like I just whipped out 28, over 100 single leg squats without some foundation that got me there. Like it took years to develop. Now, why am I talking about it? Well, a lot of people write in, they're like, man, I couldn't do that. It would really hurt. I'm too old. Every time I try to do a basic squat, I can't even do that. It hurts my back. I've been in all these positions. I've had all these issues as I got older. And I'm a firm believer in strength conditioning for injury prevention, for just life in general, but for injury prevention and especially for hunting and the way I want to do it. And I want to do it for a really, really long time. So there are a lot of people that have different workout routines that work for them. There's a ton of ways to be fit. What I want to talk about today is what I do and why I do it. And I'm going to pull from the book, The Supple Leopard, written by Kelly Starrett. Basically, his book is Becoming a Supple Leopard. It's the ultimate guide to resolving pain, preventing injury, and so on. So resolving pain and preventing injury is kind of like the main goals. And that's what his book, The Supple Leopard, really focuses on. And so I'm going to read from this a little bit, and I'm going to dovetail off of it to kind of expand what I know about it or what I've learned from it and how I use it. So I think it's going to be really useful to people. I don't want to get into the whole, I'm just going to read from it and start from there. Okay. So I think this is really going to help a lot of guys, especially people that are struggling with knee pain, back pain, shoulder pain. There's some things that we just don't know. We're not taught well. And this book, I can't recommend it enough. It is a life changer. If you have the discipline to read it, or if not, at least listen to this podcast and get the cliff notes, but start adopting some of these principles.
Isn't the book broken down?
It's brilliant. So like, for example, let's say you have shoulder pain.
Yeah.
You can go into the book, especially if you have the PDF version or the Kindle version, and you just click like it says, shoulder issues. You click on that, boom, it takes you to the chapter and all the things you do to address shoulder issues.
So you don't have to read the whole book. You can just go, I have a problem spot at my ankle.
Yeah. But what I want to get into is he describes it better, so I'm going to let him do it. So he says, how do you know if you have some sort of problem? More specifically, how do you know when your body is not operating at its full potential? The average athlete typically uses cues like pain, swelling, loss of range of motion, decreased force. You can't lift something. You can't do a dumbbell curl or something. Numbness and tingling. The conversation with yourself begins something like this, usually. When I run lately, my knee hurts. I wonder what's wrong with my knee. Though typical, there are many errors in this line of thought. The first is that pain and other symptoms of injury they're lagging indicators. That's just a fact. So by the time your knee is telling you it's got a problem, it's way, way downstream of what caused it. Mm-hmm. For example, swelling might indicate tissue overuse or strain from poor mechanics, but swelling is an after-the-fact sign. The tissue damage has already occurred. It's helpful to have a diagnostic tool that can highlight dysfunction and let you know that something is wrong, but only if it is applicable before the fact. Imagine if you had to wait for your car's engine to blow up to know when you should add oil, or if a soldier had to wait for his weapon to jam in the middle of a firefight to know when to perform some preventative maintenance. That would be stupid. But in general terms, this is how modern sports medicine operates. We wait until something is broken, sometimes horribly so, before we expect a physician or physiotherapist to fix it. This paradigm keeps orthopedic surgeons very busy. You can imagine what the doctor thinks when you come into his or her office with a hole in your kneecap from years of poor movement practices and overtight tissues. Seriously, that bone in your knee was designed to last 110 years, and you managed to wear a hole in it in 20. In parentheses, he says, true story. Imagine waiting until you are suffering from unrelenting back pain and having your leg go numb to find out that you used poor spinal mechanics to carry a 100-pound pack as a young Marine. Also a true story. Like a light switch that's designed to last for tens of thousands of on and off cycles, our bodies are set up for millions of movement cycles. Millions. But every time you squat, bend over, or walk in a compromised position, you burn through those cycles at an accelerated rate. So by the time you've worn a hole in your kneecap, herniated a disc, or torn your labrum, chances are good that you've gone through millions of poor movement cycles. In other words, your tissues and joints didn't just wear out. Your body put up with your bad positions and movements for millions of cycles. Everyone is different, though. Genetics, training volume, and other lifestyle factors have a profound impact. But if you learn to move in the way the body is designed to move, you will put less stress on your system, reducing the number of cycles you burn through. So that's why I'm a huge proponent of proper body mechanics. When I'm crouching down to climb under the sink in my house to work on a pipe or whatever, or when I'm picking something up in the yard or in the mountains, I'm hauling a deer or lifting something, I am using the same mechanics there that I do to do a proper deadlift in the gym, right? And how you move matters. If you use really good body mechanics, you don't develop the same problems. So just picture, you see a guy on a pull-up bar, and I'll see him doing pull-ups, and I'll watch how he does his pull-ups, and I'm like, oh my gosh, his mechanics are so bad. Like everything's pulling out of socket, right? And then he's pulling on him, and then he's doing this repetition over and over and over again with those poor mechanics, and causing his ball and socket joint to like come halfway out. Mm-hmm. And then he's grinding that a little bit, and then he's got his muscles like, over pulled and his ligaments like compromised, and he's just cranking on this, and he's probably, let's say, 30 pounds overweight to boot. So he's just like really hammering on this joint and this muscle that's not strong enough to handle the load. And then he's like, man, every time I do pull-ups, man, I am sore for days. And it's like, well, a big part of that is because the mechanics are so bad, and you are compromising the joint. And just like those cycles, movement cycles, you're dramatically shortcutting the amount of cycles you get in your lifetime on that shoulder because of how you're doing it. Now, contrast that with a gymnast, for example, who is grabbing the bar properly, pulling up properly with the joint tucked tight into the socket, in your shoulder socket, and moving, in a controlled way. And scaling that up until he can stack more and more reps on that proper mechanical movement. That individual is going to have some soreness, but it's going to be pretty mild. And the next day he's going to be able to go back and do the same thing again because he did it with good movement. And so what you find usually with people is they have such bad biomechanics and bad movement that when they go and do a pull-up or a squat or a one-legged pistol or a power clean or a push-up even, they do it so poorly and they repeat it over and over again. They put so much, pressure on that joint system that they end up breaking things. And they end up chronically sore as well. So you can go to a massage therapist after every CrossFit session or whatever it is you're doing, some HIIT workout or, high intensity circuit training. And if you're doing it wrong or you're on a machine, for example, that's reinforcing bad mechanics sometimes instead of a free weight, you sit there and you jack up the thing, you go get a massage, he relaxes it. Maybe you go to the chiropractor, he fixes it and aligns it. And then you go back in the gym and you mess it up again. And you keep doing this cycle. And if you're doing it correctly, you're barely sore. You can kind of work out the soreness at home without a massage therapist. But if you went to one, it'd be just bonus. And you can go back in with that supple muscle tissue that's just getting stronger all the time through a full range of motion. And now you're a beast. When you're in a situation out in the outdoors or lifting a deer or hanging an elk hind quarter, now when you're doing that sort of thing, you're doing it with good mechanics and strength behind it, and you're not getting hurt. And you're able to really get out and enjoy yourself and do things, because you've built that foundation. Movement patterns matter. Like proper biomechanics are huge. So the second issue that the human animal is set up is that the human animal is set up for survival. So your central nervous system controls the flow of sensory and mechanical information for your entire body. So basically what he's saying is if you bang your finger, the first thing you do is start shaking it around, and you cuss.
A little bit, yes.
Usually. And the reason is you can't hear the pain signal along with the movement signal. So as you're moving it, the pain stops. Mm-hmm. Because they kind of travel along the same pathway.
Use the same freeways.
Yes. And so you shake it because it stops the pain. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as you hold it still, the pain surges back. And it's because when you're out there doing an activity, the body's like when you're if you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, which you better be fast.
You stub your toe.
Your toe. You need to be able to just keep moving.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's not until you stop or the activity's over that your brain says, we've got a problem. Mm-hmm. So the body's built to just get through. Let's say you're in an Olympic race or whatever. David Goggins goes out, breaks both shins, running a 100-mile race or something, doing the ultimate damage to his body and just grinding through it mentally. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a strong, I think mental toughness is a huge, being able to cultivate that and develop that is a game changer for life. But that aside, pushing through mental toughness, there's also the breaking down of like damaging your body. It's much easier to do it as long as you keep moving. Mm-hmm. But that's because we're built to survive, fight or flight,
Most animals are like that. How many animals have you shot? They ran 20, 30 yards, stopped to look around, and then start stumbling.
Yeah. Even some of them go miles and miles injured. They'll just go and go and go.
Or just run up that
in severe pain. Your adrenaline kicks in, your survival kicks in, and your pain gets blocked. You're in a little bit of shock, boom, it just shuts off the pain signals so you can keep going. So that's another problem. Like if you're relying on your body to say, hey, the way you're doing these pull-ups is bad, it's not going to tell you until 2 days later. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're older like me, delayed onset muscle soreness is serious. So
we can trick our fight and flight response pretty easily. Like our bodies can't really tell the difference.
Yeah. He says there's little chance that you can actually hear the pain of tissue injury and failure that it's breaking amid all the movement in like a football game or whatever. Pain doesn't work during periods of high movement load and peak output. Add stress to the equation and it really blocks the pain. So, you're getting shot at by the enemy across enemy lines. Mm-hmm. You get a bullet in you, you don't feel it. Nope. You're just like, you got to go, And so it's not until later. So if you're relying that as a mechanism to tell you, hey, you're doing these things wrong, it's not the best mechanism. Okay. That's his whole point. We're designed to be able to take a hit, keep fighting, and deal with the consequences later. That's how we are. So exercise presents a similar scenario, and he basically talks about how when you start to lose position and compromise your back and your tissues, like rounding your back during a deadlift, like if you're doing them for time or for reps in time, you may not feel it at the time, especially if you're under competition stress because you're doing some kind of CrossFit competition, the open. However, just as a fighter feels the abuse from combat after the adrenaline has worn off, your back will scream in pain when you cool down from a workout in which you did 20 improperly executed deadlifts. Okay. So just as you could say that the more skilled fighter usually suffers less damage as a result, doesn't feel as much pain, if any, after the battle, the better you are deadlifting, the less likely you are to tweak your back. And so this is just his case for good body movement, proper body mechanics. So the third most notable problem with our current thinking is that it continues to be based on a model that prioritizes task completion above everything else. So it's sort of a 1 or 0, task done or not. Like it's either weight lifted or it's not lifted, right? Doesn't matter how you did it. And he's saying, actually, it's like saying, I deadlifted 500 pounds, but I herniated a disc. Or I finished a marathon, but I wore a hole in my knee. Imagine that this sort of ethic spilling over into the other aspects of your life. Hey, I made some toast, but I burned down the house. Okay, so the point is that like you've got to really focus on the proper movement mechanics so that you don't get injured. And it's the idea that, oh, I did it, doesn't matter if you did it wrong. Mm-hmm. So when I watch others do like some kind of workout and I see them really compromise position or how they're doing it, I'm like, it doesn't matter that you did it in 2 minutes instead of 5 because you did it so badly that you sacrificed your future for a quick gain now. Mm-hmm. And by future, I mean a healthy future. Many athletes go about their business this way for decades, spending their genetic inheritance. It's like I just said, their genetic inheritance, getting their daily workout done without pain until one day it's game over. You can lift with a rounded back and sit in a chair in a slouch position until one day you just can't. So how do you keep from harming yourself? You need a set of leading indicators, observable, measurable, and repeatable diagnostic tools that enable you to predict potential problems before they manifest as recognizable disorders. The good news is that we already possess this information. It's called training. Boom. Mic drop. That's what I'm saying. That's why I say you go to the gym. It's because you're in a controlled situation. You're able to assess the things that are working and the things that are not working. If I can't do a proper squat, like ass to grass, like squat, hips open, back's not rounded, I can keep good position, then I know, okay, things are working. If I can't do that, like I'm really like my ankle doesn't bend or I can't put my arm above my head to do a proper pull up, it's like, okay, I know early on because of my limited range of motion, limited ability, that I have something that's not working. And the same thing with a squat under load. That's why I like squats. Say you put a heavy bar on your back and you squat all the way to the ground and you stand back up. It basically tells me that I have strength through this full range of motion. Mm-hmm. Not through part of it. Like I know a lot of guys that just wear a pack and backpack and that works until it doesn't. Just like Kelly's talking about. Sometimes you're going to slip and you're going to go beyond your normal exercise range of ability and you don't have muscle in that range of motion.
How many times do you catch yourself while you're out there hiking with a big heavy pack and end up doing a one-legged squat?
On a steep grade, that happens to me all the time.
Mm-hmm. And how many people just end up hitting their butt on the ground?
Most of the friends I have, and most of the people I hunt with, they just go down. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. I mean,
it's safer.
Sometimes you can just go down. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's safer.
Well, I mean, if you don't have the muscle to hold yourself up and you're going down.
But even then, I mean, it depends on where you're at and how far you're slipping. And if you're rolling down a mountain, it can happen so many different ways. But if you're going to exercise and you're going to try to live a fit life and try to be able to do it for as long as you can in your life, then why not invest in doing it the right way to get the most out of it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I try to do. I try to prioritize my exercise so it gives me the results I want. I could just go and just go, but I have an end goal of where I want to be. And it's not just physical conditioning. Like I can carry a heavy pack up the mountain day after day after day. I can do that and do it for the next 30, 40 years and not get injured. They're different. They're a little bit, one's a little more advanced, a little different level. So like he said, that's why the gym makes sense. It's like a laboratory. It's a place you can go to. Now you can do it in your garage. You can do it in your house, and you can follow some of what he has in here. It doesn't have to be a gym. He's just using that as like a scaffold to explain the philosophy behind how he approaches, fitness. So remember, this is resolving pain and preventing injury. Okay. There's a lot of guys out there, and the biggest reason I'm bringing this up is because I have guys that are my age or 15 years younger that are like, I can't do this anymore. My back is jacked. Mm-hmm. Okay. I had a herniated disc for a couple year period that was so bad. I thought life was over. Like I thought I couldn't do anything I did. It would give out and I would like be bedridden. Now I can deadlift crazy low. I can do 15 heavies. I can do 30, 100 cleans at heavy weight in a workout over a 30-minute period, and it doesn't mess me up at all. I can do over 100 pistols. Those things are a foundation now for me. I don't have those back issues that I used to have, but there was a time. So we want to resolve this pain. We want to make this stuff go away. And again, it starts with mechanics, how you move. Like understanding how your movement works. And most of the guys, like I remember sitting down with our dad, and he had bad shoulders over years of
sitting in
movements.
Truck driving.
Yeah. And so you're like, hey dad, raise your arm. And it's like, it goes to here. It goes like not even straight up. He can't put it up by his ear. He doesn't have that motion in his shoulder. Mm-hmm. And then his shoulder's like always pinched and tight and his neck turns like this. Like he can't turn his head around. It's like he has to move his entire thoracic spine. The whole body has to turn to look places. When you see that kind of thing, you're like, okay, some things you're missing that mobility. And so to exercise on top of that stuck tissue, mm-hmm. and that messed up muscle tissue is a good way to just really make things worse. So we want to undo those problems mm-hmm. and then make you stronger.
If you have a flat tire, it's not the best move to keep driving on it.
Yeah. So let me move on here. So he has a section called "You Are an Incredible Healing Machine." So this is what gives people that are saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, a window into what you're capable of. The human body has an immense capacity to heal itself. At any age and in nearly any state, the human animal is capable of an incredible amount of tissue repair and remodeling. Clearly, torn ACLs don't magically reattach, and herniated lumbar discs are slow to heal. But the human body will take a ton of abuse for a really long time before it finally gives up the fight. The fact is, our bodies will put up with our silly movement and lifestyle choices because they have a freakish amount of functional tolerance built in. We shouldn't, however, make the classic error of confusing this miraculous genetic inheritance with a tacit rationalization for it, eating, sleeping, or moving however we just please. And here's the larger point. Most of the typical musculoskeletal dysfunction that people deal with is really just preventable disease. When thinking about movement dysfunction, it's useful to classify pain and injury into 4 categories, which I've organized here according to frequency of occurrence. Those factors that account for 2% of the dysfunctional in a typical gym. So this is what causes 2% of the jacked up people that are out there. Okay. These 2 things: pathology, something serious is going on with your system, meaning you've got cancer or you've got mm-hmm. some kind of pathology that's really messed you up. Maybe it's
like Crohn's
Lyme's
or something.
Disease. Yeah. Secondly, catastrophic injury. You're a pedestrian, you got hit by a car. Mm-hmm. Okay. Those account for 2% of the problems that are in the gym. 2%. So what's the other 98%? What causes the other 98% of problems in the gym where a guy's like, dude, my back is so jacked, I can't hardly move? when they come and they seek help for training. He said overtension, which is missing range of motion. And the second one is open circuit faults, moving in a bad position. Again, biomechanics. It comes down to two things. Missing range of motion, meaning you can't properly, let's say, squat, right? You can only squat. Like I know guys that can really only just barely bend their knee.
And they can't break that level plane.
No, they couldn't go below parallel to save their life. They certainly can't take a dump in the woods. They got to sit on a log or hold onto a tree or something.
There's nothing more shameful than having to grab a sapling to take a dump.
So, I mean, there's the real issues are missing range of motion. So you don't have strength, or you're stuck. Like your hip is completely impinged from sitting at a desk for years. You just don't have the flexibility. You just can't do it. So that causes most of the problems. And the second thing that causes it, he said, is moving in a bad position, meaning that when you do a deadlift, your back is always rounded every single time. And so you keep having these major problems, these herniated discs, because your position is so poor.
Or your kid runs up, you go to pick up your kid, your back's bent just in the wrong way, and you lift him up, pinch something.
Yeah. So that's called open circuit fault. Okay. These are terms used in, by
we're getting technical.
Yeah. So pathology is, get cancer treatment, right? Then you have catastrophic injury, getting hit by a car. Those are usually surgical and require rehab and all that. So we're going to get into the things that most of us are dealing with. Most guys that ride in and gals that are like, dude, I can't believe you did that many one-legged squats. Like, I can't even, do this anymore. I'm only 35. So he says, overtension. I regularly observe athletes who lack significant ranges of motion. For example, it's not uncommon to see an Olympic medalist missing 50% or more range of motion in the anterior chain system of the hips and quadriceps. Imagine having dinner with a good friend and noticing that he can't bend his elbow past 90 degrees, which I've seen. Like a guy goes like this and he has to move his head forward to eat because his elbow, he can't reach his hand to his mouth.
That's scary.
You see it all the time, especially older dudes, He says, what's wrong with your elbow? You'd ask. Oh, nothing, the guy would say. I just set the bench press world record, but my neck and wrist kill me every time I eat. He says, this example would be silly, except that it is not unusual. In general, though, the problem occurs in less socially crippling joint tissue systems like the ankle, the shoulder, and the hip, which is exactly why I really like the pistol, because it's like the ultimate test. Do you have the proper mobility and strength in your ankle and your hip? The one-legged squat kind of says it's a real indicator. We really ought to be able to do that movement. It's a pretty basic movement. If you take any Aboriginal person, they could crank out piles of them.
Or look at a kid that's just barely starting to walk. They can all somehow squat and poop out the gates.
He said, and don't just think of flexion, bending, and extension, straightening. Full range of motion has to include the body's rotational capacities as well. Move your hand to your face as if you are going to eat. Is there resistance in this range of motion? There shouldn't be. Your limbs and joints should get stiff near end range and then suddenly stop. They should not be limited in range or be excessively stiff through the full range of motion. That means if you're moving your hand to your mouth, you shouldn't stop about 6 inches away and have to like really force it there, right? So he says, either of these symptoms indicate that your joints or muscles are overtensioned. Put simply, you're missing normal ranges of motion as a result of your tight tissues. So we all have that, especially if you go and hit the gym and the next day you can't move your arm where you want it to be. It's like you go and you work out and you're like, oh, dude, I can't do this.
You did something wrong.
Right. So in nearly every athlete I evaluate for position and movement compensations or for injured and painful tissues, I find an obvious and significant restriction in the joints or tissues immediately above or below the site of dysfunction. If you have ankle pain, chances are good that your calves are tight and are pulling on your ankles, limiting your range of motion, blah, blah, blah. So he goes into like, okay, when you are stuck and you have stuck tissue or you don't have full range of motion you have these problems. What I love about the book is he starts to say, okay, these are the things that you can do to get those things fixed. Mm-hmm. So I have a number of tools here on the table. Okay. And they're my life, my life.
Brian, how much money is on the table right now?
Oh, I would say $50, maybe a little less.
Somewhere between 15, probably 80, I would guess.
Yeah. Depending on, you don't need it all.
Nope.
There's pieces here. So what I've got here is I've got like this rubber band voodoo floss, they call it, or there's different names for it. But this is just rubber that you wrap around your muscle tissue. Mm-hmm. And I'll get to why that works and how it works a little bit later. We have lacrosse balls, this one here, which I live and die by.
How old is that ball?
Like 6 years.
Because it looks ancient.
And then I got this 2 lacrosse balls, like they might call it a peanut or something. Mm-hmm. And I do different things with those to break up stuck tissue. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, here's what's worked for me. So when I just posted that workout the other day, and Cole Kramer, who is a underground CrossFitter.
Cole Kramer, the big-time Alaskan guide.
The Alaskan guide, Cole Kramer, the bear-killing, goat-killing guide.
Of Kodiak.
So Cole is fit. So I've hiked some mountains with Cole, and I've had a heavy pack, and I've tried to keep step with Cole going uphill. Mm-hmm. I can do pretty good downhill with everybody because it has less cardio. Yet I do great on the uphill still. Mm-hmm. But it's like the doc's like, dude, your heart rate's insane. Your heart rate is incredible. Like I have a super, super low heart rate, my resting heart rate. They always wonder if I'm dead or I'm a
little worried about you.
Yeah. I have super efficient heart. Lung capacity is actually quite small. There's not much you can do about that. It's just genetic. I have a small set of lungs that don't do a ton.
I have a small set of lungs.
But I have a really efficient heart, and I think that's because I push my body so hard it makes up for the lower lungs. But it means I'm breathing pretty heavy when I do cardio. But downhill, when it's a strength-intensive exercise, low cardio, so that would be downhill hiking, I don't break a sweat. I don't feel it. It's like a break, serious break. While others, like Lampers, will be going downhill with me with similar loads, and he's got to take all his layers off. He's sweating. Things are a little shaky on the downhill. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, I enjoy it. The uphill though, I have a hard time. He and guys like Kramer, they just kind of go. And I'm like, I can keep up somewhat, but it's like I'm exerting a lot of energy to do it. And it doesn't matter how much I train. Mm-hmm. I'm just kind of, not at that same pace, but I'm still in the game. But I'm hiking with Kramer, and we get back after a long hike, and I'm curious how much his pack weighed compared to my pack. You do that. So you wander over. And so I'm like, so I go over there. And mine's super heavy. It's got a whole goat in it and everything. I'm picking it up. I'm like, dang. Then I go pick up Cole's pack. I'm like, oh, geez. Like, I don't know how much more Cole is carrying, but it's quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And he was
a goat plus camp.
And he was just a beast, So you have someone who does that day in and day out all year round. But he was telling me a year ago or so, he's like, Brian, I would have problems with his low back, said some other things. I don't know if he set his knees at all. That's a common problem with guys.
He threw out his lower back, like right at the end of season.
And so he suffered from some of this. So he started going to the gym, and there's a CrossFit gym there on Kodiak that he hits in the morning with some fire breathers that are just monsters. I think there's a lot of military folks on there and first responder types.
There were some housewives that were kicking his butt too.
Yeah.
Don't forget about that.
There's some badasses on Kodiak. So you'd have to be to live there. So Cole is there with that crew. They work together. And he's like, he told me the other day, he's back from his season. And that this season, having put in all that time doing CrossFit stuff, gym work in the off season, he's still doing lots of hiking, I'm sure, and scouting and so on. But he's putting in that off season work in a gym with weights and, kind of mixed CrossFit WOD type stuff. And he said going into this season that he felt the strongest that he's felt in a long time. And it wasn't until the last few hunts of the season that his low back and some things started to feel a little squishy, a little bit on the edge, where in seasons past, he's been really dealing with pain and tissue that's kind of broken down and done, and he still has weeks to go, and he's fighting these issues. This year, he didn't have to do that. But he did say he started to feel the lack of, CrossFit type conditioning or just weightlifting type of conditioning, squatting toward the end of the season. Now, there's a lot of people who ascribe to the idea. I think Lampers does, and other guys I've hunted with, like, all you got to do really is just hike with a backpack all the time and you're fit. Mm-hmm. And perhaps that works for some people. Maybe that is all someone like Ryan needs. I think most of us, though, fall into the camp of Cole, me, where it's like, well, I need to do more than just that to avoid injury.
Yeah.
And so here Cole is, hitting that training. And what I like about a really good CrossFit gym is they teach you about good body movement, and they don't accept when you're doing it poorly. So if you're doing a pull-up wrong or you're doing a deadlift, it's like, no, that doesn't count. Stop. Yep. You need to scale. You need to change your load. Mm-hmm. You need to drop the weight if you can't do it properly.
Or if you're doing a competition and you mess up, it doesn't count. Doesn't count. So it depends. Usually in a competition, it's get the work done. It doesn't matter how you do it. Get sloppy.
But that's a sport. It's just like running a 100-mile race. It doesn't matter how you did it as long as you follow the rules and you got to the end, But proper mechanics, in a good gym, they're saying, no, you can't do that. Nope, that's wrong. That's not acceptable. And they're teaching you. They're also teaching you how to stretch and warm up and get proper mobility, before you even hit the workout and then after you do the workout. So that's usually part of the whole package.
You're not going to go squat heavy if you don't even have that full range of motion yet.
Yeah, if you can't even do a squat without a load, they're not going to allow you to do it with a heavy bar.
And most people can't do a squat.
Well, that's the shocking thing, is most people can't do a proper squat, and nearly everyone can't do a real pull-up.
No, I can't do pull-up.
Most people I know do pull-ups. Even people that are good at do a lot of pull-ups, they do them wrong. And again, you got millions of cycles. It's just that it's maybe taking a toll a little more. That's just a side note, where Cole has experienced this and we had that conversation. I do think that these proper mechanical movements will help you. Now, when we're talking about sort of this idea of relieving pain and preventing injury, that's where these tools come into play. And one of the things that I use a lot of, Brent brought his in here, which is, this is ridiculous. This is for those that are listening, this is a Ryobi car buffer. You can get it at like Home Depot.
With handles.
Now, I have a Ryobi car buffer. I have the small handheld one. Mm-hmm. They also have these that you can buy for human grade, like human use.
Yeah, but those are expensive.
But I couldn't tell the difference between my $200 human one and my $25 Ryobi car buffer. I have a really hard time. The human one definitely doesn't leave me as
shaken.
But
they spin and they vibrate and they jiggle all the same. It's a lot going on.
Yeah. But it's amazing because you get one of those like little like Walmart massage things that's like zzz, and it doesn't do jack for me, dude.
Nothing.
You get the car buffer at the Home Depot, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah,
I'm a new man.
Yeah. And so if you follow Cameron Haynes, Cam's sitting there showing a lot more of his stretching in his Instagram story than he used to. A lot more of his mobility stuff. All people were seeing for a long time, and the same thing with me, is they just see the exercise. They don't see all the work that goes into it. And the truth is, I spend
more time,
30 or 40 minutes doing mobility work before I work out and 15 or 20 minutes working out.
Yep.
That's the truth. And what people don't see is the 30 or 40 minutes I do beforehand. That's where this book, The Supple Leopard, really helps people. If you get the book and you do follow the diagrams, then you're able to assess what's wrong with you, there's super killer photos and diagrams on, let's say you have shoulder problems. You go to the shoulder section. They're going to show you, okay, here's the proper way to do a pull-up. Here's the proper way to do a push-up. Here's the proper mechanics that you should engage in to do these 4 or 5 movements, let's say. Then you can check following the book. You can see where you're not doing the movement the way you're supposed to be. Like you can't even get into the position. Same thing with a squat. So the book shows you this and you're like, okay, so that's messed up. So then you can go, he says, okay, here's what you do. You stretch like this. You do the smash with the lacrosse ball like this.
Or you go to a doorway and you end up putting your arm against it and stretching it.
Yes. Or you use a rubber band around your arm, which pulls it sort of out of socket. And then you take the lacrosse ball at the same time and you dig it into that joint against the wall. Right? There's like all these things.
There's a tear coming to my eye just thinking about doing that.
Oh. And so the other thing is that I use is like a foam roller. Like for those that are watching.
That's a pretty hard foam roller right there.
So I have a couple soft ones and I have some that are like a PVC pipe. They're so hard.
Yeah.
Like a rock.
That's mine. And if you notice, there are some holes and chunks missing courtesy of my puppy.
Your puppy's like 100 and something pounds. So, but
she don't bite it no more.
So typically the book's really good at teaching you the proper movement. So you don't keep hurting yourself over and over again. Then it tells you how to massage and break up and get the tissue to stop being tight and restricted. And when you couple that with returning to the gym, so for me, in order to restore hip mobility, it's a process. It's like, okay, I got to roll with the foam roller on certain joints. I got to roll with the lacrosse ball on certain joints. And for me, I roll for 10 to 20 minutes every morning when I wake up because I hit it pretty hard and I'm stiff when I get up in the morning. And so I'll usually use the orbital sander or the
I really like the one with the handle strictly because I can grab it by the handle and I can hit between my shoulder blades with it. Easy reach.
Mine has a handle too. I have a couple different ones, but when I take the car buffer and I hit the muscles that are all tight and stuff, it gets the blood flowing. And some areas are really low blood flow. And so those areas take a long time to heal because not a lot of blood goes through your Achilles.
Yeah.
It's just sinew and bone. And so some of those spots can take a lot longer to get better. So when you use something like a massager to like
get some blood movement,
it gets the blood going to that area and then it can accelerate how quickly it heals. The other thing too is sometimes when you hit these tissues with the lacrosse ball or the foam roller, you want to break down in tears. It hurts so bad, especially when you're smashing your calf muscle after you've done like a whole bunch of jump ropes or something.
Or if you have a bunch of scar tissue or something.
Yeah. So you're sitting here and it's just knotted up. Well, when you use the car buffer to break it down first, and then you hit it with the lacrosse ball or the roller, it's like, it's not, you can actually do it without coming to tears.
You can work yourself up to it.
Yeah. And I think the whole package matters. So I hit it for 10 or 15 minutes in the morning. I'm stretching at the same time. So I'm rolling, smashing this tissue. What people don't understand if they've never seen it is, you take a muscle and picture it as like a 10 layer of pancakes. And between each layer of pancake is tissue. Myofascial tissue is what they call it. So your muscles like all these layers.
I always explain to like people that have ever cooked ribs. You have that silver skin right there.
Yes.
That's kind of like what your fascia is.
Yeah. And that silver skin is between your muscle fibers, like between each layer of pancake. And what happens is it can just glue those layers together and create a knot. Those layers are glued together, and so then the muscle fiber can't slip and slide and stretch like it's supposed to. It's just a ball. And so to break that up, you gotta like
go to the pain cave. It's gonna be the worst thing.
And so when you take a lacrosse ball and you smash it into that stack of pancakes, right? And then you actually try to, like, I'll do it on my back and my thoracic up here behind my shoulder blade. Mm-hmm. I'll lay on the floor. I'll put the lacrosse ball there, and then I'll raise my arm up and down, up and down. I'm moving that muscle while it's getting just smashed by the ball. And it causes that silver skin tissue to break up and the muscle fibers to then move freely.
And there's no masseuse on the planet that I have found that does as good a job as a lacrosse ball does.
Well, no. I mean, I know there's some, I've had some that can do incredible work, but most of the Swedish massage type places, they're just there to tickle your back. I mean, it's just relaxing, but it's not a sports massage. It's not the kind of massage that a physical therapist would do to fix your shoulder joint, right? But it's a combination of two things, or a few more than two, but a couple of things. That soft tissue work that breaks up all the muscle, gets it moving, gets your restored range of motion, right? Comes back. And then you go back and do the exercises again. And then you go back and you do the soft tissue work. And then you do the exercises and the soft tissue work. And it's a process of breaking up that tissue, jacking it up again, breaking it up, jacking it up, breaking it up, jacking it up, until finally you're getting full range of motion and you have strength through that whole range of motion. And it stops getting stuck. It stops getting so tight and so sore.
See, but I have a lot of friends. I'm only 30, but I've got two close friends who, rather than doing all that hard work, have ended up getting surgery for certain problems.
Well, and I think that a lot of that's kind of the quick fix culture we live in. For example, you see Cam's over there, and the guy has like that massager that's like
it's like punching him,
like a punch. I don't know what that thing is called. I forget, but that thing is just beating the hell out of his calf.
It looks like a hand mixer with a ball that's just punching him in the back,
smashing it like a jackhammer. And then he grabs the car. He'll grab the whole car buffer and he'll go up and down while he's also stretching it and moving it at the same time while it's in flexion. And dude, you know, there's when he hits Cam's hips and his
it looks
glutes,
like torture.
It's torture. It really is. It hurts. It hurts like crazy. And he has a buddy helping him twist into positions that he has a hard time getting in, and then they're getting smashed. Now Cam will admit for years he didn't stretch ever.
I was say, remember like 5-6 years ago, we did a WOD.
Yeah.
We filmed that.
Yeah.
And Cam couldn't get into like a bunch of positions to work out because no mobility.
Well, and he's super tight, which is great for running. Like, you know, like there's a lot of that stuff. You do kind of want to be tight. He talks about it in the book, The Supple Leopard. Take a T-shirt, right? And imagine if you pull on a T-shirt for 5 minutes and then you let go of that T-shirt, it's pretty well stretched, right? But it doesn't spring back. No. It stays like that. And when it's loose like that, imagine if you're just doing a static stretch, and you're stretching, and then you go run. It's like running with that stretched out T-shirt. Your muscle tissues are loose and prone to having problems, or injury. So you want to, it's a whole mixture of exercises, especially people, they really do like dynamic stretches, ballistic stretches before you go and work out rather than static stretches. And then static stretches are typically prescribed post-workout. So you do that kind of stuff.
So
like
what's an example of a ballistic stretch?
A ballistic stretch is like this kind of thing. You're swinging your arms around and you're stretching it out while you're in movement.
I imagine a guy like getting ready to like go batting or something.
You look at a boxer and he's getting ready and he's like he's bouncing around, and a fighter and he's like throwing his arms out, and that's all ballistic stretching. He's not so much just sitting there like stretching to his toes and holding that pose for a while, and then stretching his arm, just holding that for a while. Typically pre-exercise, you're doing ballistic more. Now you got to know you. I'm a super, my muscle tissue's tight. I have really good dynamic movement. So for me, static holds don't really stretch out the T-shirt. Like they barely stretch anything.
Yeah.
I'm pretty tightly wound, which makes it so I can do a box jump from a seated position up to my neck or over above my head. Like I can jump super high for being a white guy. I'm explosive, but I don't have slow, like I can lift more doing a clean and jerk. Like 345 was my max clean and jerk, but I could barely deadlift, 380. And that's silly. Like I can move it better if I can move it fast and explosively than if I have to do it slow and easy. They're different kind of muscle builds. So you figure out what works for you and then what works for someone else over time. But all these things help.
What about that one right there? We didn't go over that.
This thing, I don't even know what it is.
It's called a tiger tail.
Tiger tail. Brent uses it all the time. For those that are listening, you just kind of roll it over your muscles.
It's basically a rolling pin.
It's a rolling pin, but gentler, a little bit gentler. But Brent uses this all the time. This I liken to like a massage, this like orbital sander thing, like carb buffer. It gets blood flow going. It smashes that muscle. It's kind of nice to do before you really dig in with the foam roller or a lacrosse ball or something. So it kind of gets the pre-work done so that when you dig in deep, it's not so painful.
It's also used for pressure points. You basically just jam one of those handles into a sore muscle and just dig down into it.
So the other thing that I use quite a bit nowadays is this floss.
Yeah, the floss. I'm curious about that because I've never seen the floss in action.
So the first time I really saw it work, I knew a guy that had a problem with he had tennis elbow, super bad. And so anytime that he went to lift anything, it would just kind of want to give out. The bicep, nothing was working. And so the physical therapist he was seeing started having him wrap this rubber band basically super tight around these muscles. And then he was to sit there and flex, like do a curl under load with that thing wrapped around it. Well, if you think about your pancake analogy earlier in the silver skin that's stuck in between, okay, when you take a rope or a rubber band and you just constrict the hell out of that muscle, like let's say your calf muscle, and you just smash it down. Now those fibers are like just compacted on top of each other. And then when you go to stand on your toes and flex your calf muscle, the muscle slides and it creates friction, forced friction, and it breaks the myofascial tissue that's stuck in between. Makes sense? That's the theory behind it. So I use it on my calves all the time. Like you wrap it super tight around your calves and then you stretch your calf forward and backwards while it's wrapped. And for some reason, it just causes that tissue to break apart. So for me, like I said, in the morning, I'll grab the orbital, electronic orbital car buffer. I'll run that over some tissue. Then I'll roll out on the lacrosse ball and the foam roller and I'll hit that. And then sometimes I'll wrap like whatever's like sometimes I have some forearm issues or some calf pain. I'll wrap the floss around there, do a few stretches with it for about 2 minutes, unwrap it, do the other leg. Boom, I'm done. I'll wrap it around my hamstring when that's super tight. And then I'll, in the midst of all that, I'll stretch too, just different stretches. Kelly Starrett in this book, Supple Leopard, he shows you a bunch of stretches. I hit a bunch of those, and then it takes 15 minutes or so. It's an investment. It's an investment of time, 15 or 20 minutes. But then I feel like I'm 20 again. Like I feel so supple and loose and ready to go. Gets my morning set off right. Sometimes I'll get in a hot shower, super hot shower first thing in the morning, or a hot bath if I'm really sore. Then I'll do all these stretches after I've got out of that hot water. And then I'm pretty loose, and I'll make sure I hydrate really well, drink a lot of water and stuff in the morning. I'll usually fast until 1 o'clock or so, or noon, before I eat anything that day. And I just feel really capable. And then when I hit the gym later in the day, I'll do it again, 10 or 15 minutes. I'll roll out, do all the stretches, hit the lacrosse ball, all these things, the massage thing. I'll do it all. And then when I'm done, before I go to bed, usually I'll take a few minutes and do it. So you're talking about per day, breaking it up, 30 to 45 minutes on a workout when I'm doing something really heavy. I might end up doing an hour plus of just foam rolling and so on. So that's this part that's not really talked about a lot of times. But it's what helps me be strong and prevent injury and so on. I can't imagine people who go to the gym, and I know people like this, who go to the gym, do what I do, go home, and they never stretch really before. They don't stretch or roll anything. Then they go sit at a desk for 2 days. Then they go to the gym again, and everything's kind of always messed up. you are not taking care of your mobility and and
it's like driving your car and never putting oil in it.
It's a pain in the butt, but these moments to take the time to open your hips, to work on these mobility things, it's a big deal. So we've talked about good biomechanics, and we've talked a little bit about soft tissue work that you're doing, multiple times a day, or at least pre-workout, post-workout, where you're getting sore spots undone and then going back and doing proper body mechanics, right? Proper movement. So this holistic approach gives you all that strength, but there's some things we didn't address that also play a big role. And in Kelly's book, he describes it as adaptation errors. And I'll read this. He said, "As I said earlier, I will teach you the safest and most effective body positions so you can optimize performance and resolve pain and dysfunction." That's kind of what we've been talking about the whole time. Proper movement to minimize pain, dysfunction, make you stronger, proper soft tissue work to break things up, massage, address stuck issues, like all of that. But before moving on to the actual movement principles, mobilizations, and so on, it's important for you to understand that lifestyle errors have a direct impact on how well or how poorly you move. Lifestyle errors.
Okay, expound on that, because I have an idea.
Brent, let's address these now and set the foundation for your success. You cannot make basic lifestyle errors and expect your body to be able to absorb the consequences when you are working in a performance biased paradigm, right? You want to be the fittest, the healthiest, the strongest person you are. For example, it is impossible to make fundamental errors in hydration, nutrition, sleep, and stress and not suffer any direct impact on your elliptical bicep training. So his point is these adaptation errors are those things. These errors include not warming up or cooling down. Okay. So kind of what we're talking about, like getting ready for the exercise. Sleep deprivation. You're not getting enough sleep, so you can't. Don't
you have a rule that if you don't get enough sleep, you don't earn the workout?
That's typically how I do it. There's a difference between being mentally tough and which I want to be able to do, and I test myself in the mountain and when I don't have an option. Mm-hmm. But let's say I'm going to smash some WOD and I'm on a program I'm hitting throughout the week. For me, I earn the right to do the workout by being disciplined to get the sleep I need to do the workout. So if I smash myself on Monday doing some crazy workout and then I stay up all night and I get up at, I only slept 3 hours and the next day I'm supposed to do this other workout, it's like I haven't even recovered from the first one. Mm-hmm. Everything's sore and stuck and busted. I haven't quite healed. I've put a lot of stress on myself from not sleeping. Then I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing today's workout. I already know it's just going to compound what I've already done. So I might go, but I'll go really light. I'll do like an active recovery type day. I'll just do light movements and some rowing and some biking, and then I'm home again. But yeah, sleep, I rank sleep really important. And for me, I've noticed I get much better gains in the long run. I prevent injury, all that kind of stuff when I don't commit these errors. So I get hydration, good. I get sleep. I roll and warm up and stuff like that. I eat an anti-inflammatory type of diet, clean. And the other two things he puts on here that's interesting because he says nutrition, fluids, right? Sleep. We all know those things. Mm-hmm. Warm up, cool down. We all know that. Like you should stretch before you go and do something crazy. But these are the two that he puts on there that get super ignored. Prolonged sitting.
Mm-hmm. Sitting is the new cigarette smoking, dude.
That's what they say. Prolonged sitting is on this list, and then stress. Mm-hmm. Prolonged sitting. So I can tell you, like my herniated disc was from prolonged sitting. It was from years of college and sitting in a desk and sitting at home and study and everything, and then a career that put me in a desk all day from morning till dark, day after day. Connective tissue, meniscus, spinal discs, fascia, articular cartilages, tendons, and ligaments all suffer from the immediate and downstream effects of an unhealthy lifestyle. Managing and optimizing the lifestyle aspects of sports performance are certainly beyond the scope of this book, but I would be remiss if I did not mention that I regularly observe the significant changes in athletes' mobility and ultimately position when they begin to address and correct these vital aspects. So again, sleep, nutrition, diet matters, not sitting day after day after day in the same spot. And if you do, what are you doing to fix it. Which brings me up to another interesting point. In this book, he talks about you being a healing machine. And I love this section where he goes on. He has a section called the super couch. And it's basically if you sit in a chair all day, there's a whole chapter on the things you should be doing with a lacrosse ball and a rubber band and a foam roller each day, each night to undo the damage you're doing while you sit at a desk all day long. There's another section about if you have really jacked up shoulder problems. Here's all the stretches and the exercises and how often you need to do it 2-3 times a day in the morning, afternoon, evening. And these things are just basic, but they add up over time when you do them properly.
My wife works for a chiropractor, and the only chairs inside its entire office are in the waiting room. Nowhere else in the entire office are there chairs.
Well, I have a standing desk, and I work standing up all day long and have done that for 9 years now or so, maybe longer. I think that's the only way to go. I stand all day at a desk. It's not a thing. Doesn't bother me at all. I can stand there and work 8-9 hours standing up. I remember when I first started, I'd go about an hour or 2 hours, and I had to sit down for 30 or 40 minutes and then stand up again and then sit down and stand up. But nowadays, I mean, that took a couple of years. And then what I loved about it too is people would schedule a meeting with me in my office.
Your cubicle?
My cubicle. And I'd be like, they'd come in and I'm like, sure. And then they come in, look for a chair. And I'm like, we don't have them. And we'd stand at my desk and have
quick
a meeting.
Meetings, huh?
And people would end that meeting like 20 minutes. They're dying, dying. They want to sit down. Like you should be able to stand all day long. And yet people would just crumble at 20 minutes and be like, okay, let's we got the meeting done. Good. Kept the meeting short.
See you later, Bill.
So I mean, this is mostly an audio podcast. Mostly everyone who's tuning in listens to the audio. There's a small subset of the audience, like less than 5% that actually watch it on YouTube. But we might do an extended podcast if you guys are interested where it's more video related, where we show you kind of some of the things I do to warm up or what I do to fix my hip or my shoulder or whatever. But I have certain things and the book talks about certain things that your body type, the way you move, all that kind of stuff, where you have problem areas. Okay. And I have areas I've discovered over time that are problems for me. And they're not the same for my wife. She has issues, totally different areas where she gets knots and tight tissue.
I have a bunch of muscles I'm missing, and I just have a couple problem spots that are just weird for other people.
Yeah. So everybody's a little different. So you got to, as Kelly Starrett says, find your business. So when you roll out with a lacrosse ball or all these things, you're stretching all the time and you're finding, I'm impinged here. I can't move this, or this left side is way different than my right side. You start to fix these things over time as you figure out what's wrong. So for me, some things that that I work on every day is my rhomboids. So the thoracic spine here, the upper part of my back. And a lot of people have pain there.
That's kind of right underneath the top of your shoulder blades, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of under the shoulder blade.
It's really hard to get to. I have problems there too.
Our whole family does. And so that's something that some people never have the problem there. That's where the lacrosse ball really does the magic. And so I usually put it up. I usually lean against the wall and dig in against the wall. I dig in so hard that I put a hole in the
I was gonna say I lay on the floor and do it.
I'll start on the wall and kind of work it softly, and because it's so painful. Then after I'm done with the wall, I'll lay on the floor and really dig in. And what I've noticed with stuck tissue is it's painful. So don't go hog wild so you'll cry because it hurts so bad. Like go light for a while, come back to it 5 or 10 minutes later, go light some more, go a little heavier. And you can work up to where it stops hurting so bad when you go all in.
But man,
I don't know why.
There's nothing better than finding that spot, rubbing that muscle out. Oh, you just feel like a whole new person.
Well, you do. You can all of a sudden your arms moving and your shoulders moving to the right position.
And you might not even known that you were walking and moving and sitting funny for weeks because of that one little tight spot.
Because that spot. And the thing that I found is if you leave it alone, it stays that way for weeks. At least now, at my age now. It stays that way.
It doesn't go away.
It just kind of gets locked and then stays. Where this, I hit it in the morning, in the evening, like I do on my routine. Within a couple of days, it's gone. And I have full range of motion and I'm good. And it doesn't, when I go back to the gym, when I do a full pull-up, I'm doing it properly. I'm not changing and you'll notice like people that have problems on, let's say their left side's really messed up. They go back to the gym and they want to do their WOD or whatever their workout is. So then they go and they like pull mostly with their right arm because they're working around
their whole body's
this
tweaking.
problem because they have to compromise position because they don't have the range of motion to properly move. Like you'll see a guy do a squat and he leans on one side because the other side is jammed. It's like, well, you need to get that unjammed and do it properly. So that's one thing that I hit all the time. And usually I use the car buffer first and then I'll hit the lacrosse ball. The other thing that I have trouble with, and people have this issue all the time, is their wrist gives out. So they go to do a push-up and they're like, dude, my wrist just constantly is giving out. Like, I don't know why.
I don't have wrists. My hand and arm just meet.
Yeah.
There's no wrist.
Well, they'll have this wrist where it's like, they'll be like, or they'll lose grip. And like, I just don't have any grip. And so they're trying to rub around the wrist where this problem is, where they think the problem is. They're like, man, when I put pressure on it, it just gives out. Well, for me, that tight spot is right here, which is, for those that are looking, it's just, I guess, the top side of my forearm. I don't know what this muscle is exactly, but it's this little tiny muscle.
It looks like it's a tendon.
Little tiny muscle right here that I roll. And so I'll hit the wall like this and I'll just dig it into that muscle and flex my hand back and forth and move it around. And this muscle on the top, as I flex my wrist back and forth, it'll break loose. And then all of a sudden I can do a push-up. I can't feel, like right now, I can't feel any weakness at all. But the part that's broken is way back here. It's nowhere near my wrist. It's all the way up here by my elbow. And so you got to learn that stuff as you mess around. You're like, oh, that's where my problem is back here. It gets tight and locked up.
Yep.
And for me, it's not because of my exercises. It's because of my video editing and all the work I do on a computer all day. So I sit here and I do this type, and I do this edit, and I'm trying to make this Mule Deer series videos and everything. And I'm just doing computer work. And then I go and I can't do a push-up very well because my wrist is giving out. Well, it's
been frozen all day.
Because it's been frozen like this. So I try to make sure that I'm sitting at a desk properly, my back is straight, that I'm not doing this repetitive movement injury, carpal tunnel type thing because of how I sit. I try to use a mouse more. I try to shake out my arms and not be, because it's the sitting at the desk and the computer work that really has a lot of us messed up. And so I try to balance that. But regardless, the sore spot is back here, not in the wrist. And the same thing is true with calf muscles, especially. A lot of times it's the bottom of my foot. And so standing on a lacrosse ball and rolling out your arch is one of the best feelings in the world.
It is.
After a long day and you roll out on the bottom of that and your arch of your foot you just feel all those muscles breaking up. Well, that muscle tissue goes up around the heel and connects to the Achilles and so on.
And your Achilles is like a steel cable.
Yeah. And so to get that loose, I've got to use the lacrosse ball. And that's what actually the issue with my calf muscle and my Achilles is more to do with my foot. So by rolling out my foot, it relieves the pressure on my Achilles. The other thing that a lot of people have is a low back problem. And usually that's because their glutes and their hams are so tight, it's pulling on their low back. So the glutes and the hams are so huge. Those muscles are so big, especially if you're me.
They're like
and you got
48 times the size of your lower back muscles.
Yeah. And so when they get worked out and they do, over 100 one-legged squats, they're going to shrink and contract a little bit from being so sore and broken and tight. And that's going to pull on your lower back. And then your lower back's going to give you signals that you've got problems with the low back. But really, it's your glutes and hams that are so locked up that's causing the back pain. And so people are sitting there rolling out their low back, and it's like, that's not where the problem is. It's in the hamstrings and it's in the glutes. So when you hit the lacrosse ball on those things and the foam roller and the different techniques, here, and you're stretching and you're getting into those corners that you can't quite reach. That's why I really like the lacrosse ball, because it can really find all the little tight corners. But I also like the foam roller just to smash my entire glute, roll my butt on that thing and just.
I had my left hip was popping out of socket. I was lifting and doing heavy squats. I kept rubbing out my LT bands, kept rubbing out my leg and my hip and doing all those things for months. It's probably 6 months, and it popped out like 2 or 3 times. Like I had to go see a physical therapist to have them put it back in. And the guys there were not helpful.
Yeah.
And I finally figured out I had blown my left ankle out like almost 10 years ago playing volleyball. I mean, blew my left ankle out. And it's always been fat, and it's always had scar tissue, and I've always ignored it. And then I probably spent the next 3 months just working on that scar tissue, trying to break it up and get it so it's not quite. And my ankle is probably half the size now that it was, 10 years ago.
Yeah, breaking that up, using the car buffer, using the lacrosse ball.
Mostly with the lacrosse ball.
Yeah.
And it
and then
hell.
actually stretching it and continuing to go back and do the lifts under load, and then going back and hitting it again.
But my ankle was pulling my hip out.
Yeah.
Everything's connected.
It's all connected. That's why kind of when you look at proper movements and you're like, oh, I'm not able to get that movement. So for me, it's an alarm bell if I can't do a one-legged squat. Like, it's like, why can't I? Like, what's missing there? Why can't I? Is it my ankle is not mobile, or it's my knee or my hip, or, something's not in position, right? Then I know something's sort of locked up or broken, and that means I need to get in there and figure out what it is. And it might be something like you said, it might be your ankle or your calf. What's really helpful with the Supple Leopard, Becoming a Supple Leopard, the book, is when you have something that's messed up, you can go in there and look at the diagrams, and it's really well written. The diagrams are so helpful visually.
He's redone the book a couple of times as well.
I have the second edition, and it's solid. And so when you go in there and you look at it, you can find, like Brent said, he's got this problem. It's a chain, and so he can kind of walk through all.
You go to shoulder, what part of your shoulder? He'll have the muscles, and he'll have. If you have problems here, go to this page. If you have problems in this part of your shoulder, go to this page.
And what it kind of does is you can work your way back into fixing your problem. And it's really empowering because when you start working on something that's been broken for 10 years and it's always causing you pain. Well, you fix the movement so you don't keep causing the problem. And then you use the techniques to break down the tissue and to heal it and relieve and stop the pain. It makes you feel really good. There's a few people that look at something like a one-legged squat or like a handstand push-up or a muscle up, a ring muscle up, and they're like, Brian, why would you do that? Like,
that's stupid. You're never going to do that in real life.
The reason I do it, first of all, it's fun. Like, like being at the gym and doing these things for me is like playtime. Handstand walking, things like that. It's just kind of fun. It's goofy, and I'm like, can I do it? But those things actually build strength and prevent, in a way that really does prevent injury, in a way that you don't realize. So those gymnastic type movements, they take a really long time to develop. To do a real safe muscle up takes a long time. A strict ring muscle up takes a long time to develop. But once you have, it takes a certain degree of mobility to do it, and strength through an entire range of your shoulders motions. Doing a dip on a static plane, on a moving ring, is a lot different than doing a dip on parallel bars that don't move. And all those little stabilization muscles that you develop, it's like doing a handstand walk or push up. There's a certain amount of stability that goes into all these little pieces that make it possible. And I just feel like the one-legged squat, similar, like it takes a lot of balance and little tiny shifts in motor control to do that carefully and to do it and to stand up. And I think all of those things really build a foundation to prevent injury over time. Anyway, my 2 cents, I guess. Take it or leave it. It's been life-changing for me. Go check out the book, Becoming a Supple Leopard by Kelly Starrett, The Ultimate Guide to Resolving Pain, Preventing Injury. You can find this book. Do we put links to these things on on our page.
Well, if you're watching this on YouTube or description for whatever app you're downloading, well, we can put some links in those.
Because if you buy it through Amazon, through us, then it helps us. We get some kind of kickback from Amazon. That's cool. We don't have it.
That's not.
Brent's supposed to have it set up.
It's right there.
He's supposed to have it done for like a year.
No. I barely started. The problem is Brian has me locked in a basement editing footage 24/7.
Speaking of which, the mule deer videos are going to be 3 parts, and they're coming out. They're going to be published starting Sunday, a day after tomorrow, because it's Friday for us today. And they're going to go out Sunday. One is going to go out Sunday. We're going to do another one the following Sunday and the Sunday after that. But what's cool is we're doing a bunch of giveaways and stuff, so you get entertained. Plus, you can be entered to win some stuff if you just go subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave us a comment on the video, and we're going to pick some winners for some cool stuff, live and give it away. So do that. Check it out. It's a cool hunt.
You guys got any questions?
If you've got questions about this fitness, this kind of body movement, one thing that I've thought about doing is actually showing people or talking about a proper squat, proper pull up, or how do you reach those spots, like showing you on a video how I roll out with this. The thing I probably do the most is I lay on the floor and with this lacrosse ball under my hip or on my glutes, and I roll around on the floor and smash all my hip flexors and all the muscles with the lacrosse ball.
You can pick up a lacrosse ball up just about any place that has a sports sections, Target, Fred Meyers.
This lacrosse ball goes with me everywhere I go.
And it's like $4.
I haven't backpacked with it, but I do use my Nalgene bottle or my GSI bottle to as a foam roller to hit my calves and stuff. But definitely this goes on every airplane ride and every car travel. And this one I drive in the car with. Both of them usually.
I put that peanut one right there, the 2 lacrosse balls that are connected together. Put that on my lower back when I'm driving.
Yep. Me too. I put this one right between the shoulder blades with the spine in the middle, and I roll out. It's kind of changed my life since I started doing all that work. There's a lot of guys that have problems with their IT band. That's that's a huge, huge piece of connective tissue that causes a lot of trouble for some guys.
And for those that don't know, the IT band's on the outside of your legs and pretty much at the very side of your body going down, connecting your knee to the top of your hip, something like that.
All I know is that when you roll out on a foam roller, when that thing's sore,
you know.
And what's funny is if you're not sore, you don't feel anything. And that's the thing with stuck tissue or damaged tissue. You're going to feel it. It's going to hurt. And then what's crazy is like when you roll out on a lacrosse ball on a spot that you're usually jacked up on, like let's say your calves, but you've you went to Cancun and you hung out there for a while, or you went to,
take a pic,
Disneyland, whatever. You took it easy for a couple of weeks and you go and you hit some of this stuff that's normally pretty sore all the time. And you're like, you feel nothing. All that tissue is supple. When supple tissue does not hurt when you roll it, touch it, and smash it. Stuck tissue hurts like hell. So that's one way how you find your business is if it hurts, it's got problems. It's swollen. If it doesn't hurt, it just feels like nothing. Anyway, get out there, folks. Get mobile. Get supple. Get strong. And thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've got direct questions, leave the comments in the YouTube video. That helps. DM us on Instagram. I try to respond there. If you reach out to me on Facebook, it's a 1 out of 50 chance I'll get back to you.
If you've ever thrown a message in a bottle out into the ocean, that's kind of what Facebook is.
And use the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops, and you'll save on shipping. Use the code GRITTY at Sissy Sticks. Get yourself some sweet trekking poles. And use the code GRITTY at Heather's Choice.
Get 15% off.
15% off. Especially if you're traveling right now. Not a lot of guys are hunting, but a lot of guys are on the road. They're going on, there is some Arizona hunts coming up. January, February.
Ryan, I don't need an excuse to eat a packaroon.
Yeah. So get yourself some packaroons and some salmon chowder.
Try out them amarettos.
The amaretto packaroons. Yeah, use the code GRITTY. You get 15% off. That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty.